as before, we always put the brief history of the history of ancient Chinese. So remember, Han Fei is the time almost same as Alexander, and it's about 200 something. So it's later than Alexander. Okay, so just around this time, so much later than Socrates. So it's about, Han Fei is about 200 something BCE. Okay, I think. So it's very late of the warrior state. So we already put the history on that. Okay, so there's Sage King. So I decided to make something a little bit different today. So since the reading will involve some of the Sage King, okay, so I just like to show this, that we can call it the mythology, the Sage King, not Sage King yet, that's a mythology tradition. So basically, this one has no, I should say, no controversial, okay? Everybody agree on this fact, okay? So doesn't matter you are Taoism, Confucianism, Legalism, Zhuangzi, whoever, over, I think it's over 2,000 plus years, nobody disagree on that, okay? Unless you are stick to the, try to find the fact. Okay, that's controversial. But as a mythology, just nobody denies Zeus has so all powerful in Greek world. Right? So they have the Nestor who
is Leji?
Who is who?
Leji at the bottom.
Just 1 minute. Okay, I'll get there. Okay. Nestor is the, I think we mentioned that's to build the arboreal. Okay, so they build a house on the tree. Then kindler, teach people how to drill the kindling and drill the dry wood to make the fire. Okay, and then we have a farmer. That means Chinese start to become an agricultural society. Okay, then Yellow Empire. He is also, I think he stayed between the mythology and the Sage King tradition, right? Since him, so all Chinese claim China or Chinese culture have 5,000 years history that start from so-called Huangdi, the Yellow Emperor. I think that probably the standard translation. So he teach every good thing, is from him. So that mark the time of civilization. Okay, so and I put the Lei Zhu. Okay, Lei Zhu. Okay, so that's his wife. Okay, so nobody have a wife until Yellow Emperor. Okay, so his wife, of course, you can imagine also the best wife. So did all the good thing like okay, important silk. Okay, she invented. Okay, she taught people how to do the silk. So that's the legend. So let's have Pin and Philip and the Phil.
I just want to add two. One is 女娲氏, the woman that saved the heaven from collapsing onto earth by melting stone and mending the heaven. And also Fuxi, who started observations of nature and invented the octograms, which later became I Ching.
Yeah, that's important, and they have many. I think I probably will run a section only talk about Sage King tradition. Okay, and another one probably related to the Chinese mythology, because the LA mythology group is talking about have Chinese mythology, and then I probably will prepare a mythology presentation for them, and then I probably use part of this, related to philosophy in our section. So
I plan in late August leading a discussion on history of Chinese philosophy, and I'll probably touch on the sage.
Yeah, that'd be good.
The sage rulers as well.
Yeah, the Sage King tradition. Yeah, we cannot. Yeah, this is always there. Phil, please.
Yeah, you might say something about Is this unique to Chinese civilization that all these inventions are tied to human beings? In other words, it's grounded in humanity. Almost all civilizations have gods, came first, and somehow passed some kind of knowledge to mankind. If that really is true, there's no real God that appears. If there is a God, then it's invisible. Then, in a sense, the heroes of culture really are some kind of like great men or great women. That grounds it in humanity, which is quite unique, I think, in even Eastern cultures in general. Will you say something about that, if that's indeed true? Or is there just you guys just didn't mention the gods?
Okay, I just have to say that's another question we can discuss later. Let's don't spend too much time to talk about this, but that's a very good question because the personal view, I see, I didn't skip that part, okay? My personal view is Chinese is agricultural civilization, okay? Okay, so more concern is civilization, unlike Western is more concern is creation. So if you deal with the creation, you need God, and the civilization, probably you don't need God. That's
well, no, Egypt was an agricultural civilization, and they had gods.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Okay.
I do think it's fairly unique, and even our creation story. There was another one, 盘古氏, was a giant human who, after his death, basically decomposed into earth. His blood vessels became the rivers and things like that.
We can put this way, you know, probably have a God, okay, but then I didn't ignore it. Probably Confucius ignored it. So, you know, people after that, you know, ignore it. That's probably one of the reasons. Yeah. So that's another question. You know, let's move on, and then we can put this on hold, and later we can talk about this. You know, because our purpose is still Han Fei's legalism, and then thank you for question about this. So after mythology, then I just decide to make a chart or make it easier. So every 500, okay, this number is not exact, but roughly correct. Okay, so basically we talk about Huangdi, okay, and remember he has a wife. This one is a sage tradition. So all the good guy have a bad guy, right? So on bottom is the bad guy, that's a tyrant. So that's the sage king. So I think we'll make it clear. And all this one, all in agreement. So different philosophers, even they attack each other, they all agree on this kind of as a fact, okay? They just have a different view on how do they do it. But the fact that nobody argue on this. So basically, Yellow Emperor, okay, he has a wife, remember, and he has enemy, okay, so-called Chiyu, okay. So Chiyu represent the southern culture, okay. So I think the story means the northern culture conquered the southern culture, okay. So that's the Huangdi and the Chiyu, and then you probably will read whenever we read the ancient Chinese philosophy, you will see the name Yao, Sun, and Yu. Okay, Yu, Yao, and the Sun. Yao give up. What's the good virtue of Yao? Yao give up his throne, his position to Sun, and not given to his son. And the Sun give his position to Yu, okay, not given to his son. So Confucianism, Confucius has highly praised on this kind of selfless position. And then Yu started the first dynasty, okay, of China, because he's a channel builder in this text called the translation called channel builder, because at that time the Yellow River is flooding, so he dig the channel, and then because he's so good, and his son also very good, that's why start from him. He's not giving his position to the sage, and instead give to his son. So they have the so-called Xia dynasty. Okay, so it lasts for, I say, roughly 500 years. Then of course, to the end, they have the tyranny called Jie. Okay, then they have another one sage king called Tang. Okay, Tang, he start to kill Jie and get a new dynasty called Shang dynasty. And sometimes you refer as Yin or Shang, they all the same. Okay, so that's their dynasty. Okay, so again, another 500 years. Okay, Shang's another tyrant come out. Okay, it's Zhou. Okay, don't confuse with Zhou and the Zhou. The tongue is different, but unfortunately, the English spelling are identical. So don't just get confused. When we talk about Zhou, it's a tyrant, and then the Wen and the Wu, father and the son, kill Zhou. Okay, so with the help from Zhou Gong, okay, they built the Zhou dynasty. Remember, Zhou as a tyrant being killed, and the new dynasty called Zhou is started. That's the dynasty Confucius constantly praised. That's the best. Okay, and the Zhou Gong as a prime minister for the first emperor, he set up all the ritual, all the political system, and that's perfect according to Confucius. And all Confucius' idea to do is going back to this ideal world. So that's the story, and the 500 years, that's Confucius. So that's everything come up. So that's I do another way to introduce a sage king and a tyrant. So I hope we make it clear. You don't have to know every detail, but basics. We would encounter this kind of name again and again whenever we read the Chinese philosophy. Okay, and if you read the Buddhism, you're not going to talk about this, but Zhuangzi, Laozi, they all talk about this. Yeah. Question? Okay, before that, there's one more slide. Let me talk about the school. Just most of people probably know, but just make it clear. Okay, so-called the Warring State have 100 schools, and we put 4 major schools here, and they have 96, and we don't know what they are, but what they have, we know some, but there's a 4 major schools. Okay, so Confucianism, legalism, Taoism, and Moism. Okay, Moism we will find day to introduce about Moism, which is more like religious group. Okay, that's a different thing. Okay, but these 3 important. Okay, I think we already talked this one. Let's talk about their system. So Confucianism, of course, we can say start with Confucius, and then he has a disciple, Mencius, and what the so-called disciple is now. I put a dash line here because they don't see each other. They just, after 100 years later, somebody claim, just like St. Paul and Jesus, right? St. Paul never see Jesus, but he claimed he's a disciple. But it's long, about 100 years later, 150 years later, Mencius and Xunzi, and we already know Mencius claimed human nature is good, and Xunzi claimed human nature is bad. But both are Confucianism. Okay, but see, Xunzi even consider human nature is bad. Because it's bad, so we need to study, we need to learn, we need to work, we need to read. Okay, so you will become good. So to him, human nature is bad. That's good, because we are bad, we have a chance to improve. So he's confused. He has 2 students. Okay, that's a direct student, Han Fei and Li Si. Okay, they take their teachers' message, but they look at totally different way. They say, oh, human being, that's the human nature. That's work on give advisor to the minister, to the emperor, how to control human. What's the best way to deal this? So that become the so-called legalism. And I would not say, I put this dash line here, I would not say legalism is, they started the legalism, but legalism have a very long tradition. Okay, we will find the time to introduce in China. And they're the different ideal, but basically they are government minister. Okay. So I think, because they are busy doing the real work, So they probably don't have the leisure time to write too much book. So they have some book left, but it's not systematic. So until Han Fei, who is a starter, he cannot talk too much. So cannot.
Jason,
so
Audrey is asking you to speak louder. She's
oh, sorry.
having a hard time hearing
that,
you. Or maybe your microphone needs to be closer or something.
So it's not clear now?
Oh, yeah, that's good.
Is it good? Yeah, please let me know. Yeah. Okay, so it's okay now? Everybody okay on this?
Yeah.
Okay, so Han Fei and Li Si, okay, that's the both are Xunzi student. Okay, so I just want to mention that before, they have a long tradition. Okay, and Han Fei is specifically famous because first he wrote a lot. Second, he kind of combined different idea of legalism tradition and put together. And the later story is both Li Si and Han Fei work for the Qin Dynasty. And then Li Si start to jealous about Han Fei, how smart he is. He's afraid Han Fei will take his position. So Li Si start to put Han Fei in the jail and then kill him. But later on, Li Si got killed. Later for another later story. And then Taoism, that's another tradition. So that's from the Laozi, from the Zhuangzi we talked about last week. So I just put a little bit, we will touch later with not too much detail. Okay, then the Confucianism, then about Zhu Xi, I think it's about 100, CE Common Era, have a new Confucianism come out, and the Taoism have the Neo-Taoism come out. Okay, and then legalism around the recent time, 19th century, have a so-called neo-legalism come out. But neo-legalism and the legalism become very different, So this one is the modern, or so-called modern idea. So basically, it's like have the state governed by law instead of people. So so that's the different tradition. Just give a rough big picture, and then I think when Pin talk about the history of Chinese philosophy, and then we will have a better, clear picture on this. Pin and Phil.
Yes, yeah, thanks so much for the background. I just want to add one little thing. Han Fei is very special. He's the latest of the Zhou Dynasty philosophers. He really combined three schools of thought. I think you can also draw a dashed line between Laozi and Han Fei, because he dedicated 2 chapters to his interpretation and explanations of Laozi. I think he really sees his philosophy as kind of a practical embodiment, embodying a lot of Laozi's philosophy in his proposed system.
Yeah, it's a subtle design. I think in the chapter 20 and 21, okay, he talked about dedicated to interpret, the Laozi's Dao De Jing. So yeah, that's another thing,
Yeah, so he's a Confucianist, legalist, and Taoist at the same time.
Yeah, at the same time, yeah. And you were surprised how different, when you start from the same point, and then how different it looked like when you put in the practice. I feel pretty.
I have a question. It seems like you've divided, some thinkers think human beings are good, other things are bad, okay? But it seems to me, didn't any of them think that it's a mixture of good and bad? I mean, was Confucius that guy? Because seems to me, the carrot and the stick would work best to reward the goodness and punish the badness, rather than just, punish the bad even more, or leave the ones that are kind of neutral alone. I mean, there must be others who believe in a blend of both. So to bring the totally bad human being into a good society would be very difficult if there was a blend of both to begin with. To emphasize the good. Who is that? Is that Confucius?
Okay, let's put this one on hold for a while. Sorry, Pierre, I know you asked a big question. I'm not saying it's meaningless. It's very meaningful. That's why we cannot spend too much time. So basics, I will say, they still have an argument. Personally, I don't believe Mencius say human nature is good. Okay, I believe when I read closely in the word, he said human nature has the tendency to becoming good. Okay, so that's his word by word, but people have a different idea. So, and one thing we can say, even Mencius and Xunzi, they have different idea, but they are not dumb. They all recognize they have the bad people. Xunzi also recognize they have the good people. Remember, Xunzi say that why they have the good people? Because they fake it. Okay, that's Xunzi's idea. So, that's another big thing we will talk about, and some even argue whether or not the human has a nature, right? So I think we will deal with the ones how Han Fei look at the human nature. I have a slide to talk about this. Yeah. So I think we already covered this one, and then some keyword. Okay, some keyword. I think we talk about this one. I always list the keyword, and then usually like Tian, like this one, Tian as a heaven. Okay, Xiao, it has a complex meaning, but basis no controversial. Okay, and when Theo talk about human nature, a lot of thing used is qing. Okay, is qing really means human nature, or human like, human dislike, human disposition? We don't know. It's not like easy say, oh, human is good, is bad. Okay, but the word they are using constantly is qing. Okay, so that's a different way to look at. So a lot of things are the moral word. Okay, moral concept happened in the Confucius teaching, but in legalism, probably that's not their concern. Okay, only thing they will mention is 仁义. Okay, that's the 仁 benevolence, 义 righteousness. But in legalism, they just call 仁义. In my idea is they just, that's the generalized morality, Confucian morality, I think. Yeah. So Han Fei is not so interested in the human moral, okay, ethic. He's more interested in the technique. So let's go to a few, before we go to the text, okay, let's go over a few his concept, okay. I'm not sure, okay, so first thing we talk about two handles, that's in chapter 7, okay, reward and the punishment. He talk about that's the thing will keep coming out. So you give you the reward and they give the punishment to control the people, and which will make your government efficient. Okay, that's what he's talking about. And another he talk about the loyalty. Okay, so I think the Mencius, Confucius all like talk about loyalty. That's a virtue. And Han Fei talk about small loyalty and great loyalty. Okay, so he has a separate. Okay, small loyalty is bad, like send the beautiful beauty to the emperor. That's a small loyalty, right? Your emperor like to drink, so you find the best wine for him. Okay, that's small loyalty, and the other way is a good loyalty. So he separated this. Okay, and the three keyword, okay, so-called the 法术士. Okay, if you want to go take like SAT test for Chinese legalism, probably you only have to remember these three words, 法术士, so-called law, tactics, and tendency or position of power. Okay, let me stop here, and James seems has a question. Okay, James.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just wondering I was looking at you had posted it, and I was looking at I read the Wikipedia article, and it mentions two other concepts. One is Zhenming, having actual outcome accountable to speech, which sounds a little bit Heideggerian to me. And then Wu Wei, non-exertion, which of course, so he was the originator of that concept in Chinese martial arts, the Wu Wei.
Hold on, Wu Wei, what's the second one?
Wu Wei is the second one. Oh, Jing Ming is the other one.
Zheng Ming, I
Ming.
will talk about this one. What's the second one? I don't get it.
Wu Wei, Lao Tzu the Wu Wei.
Okay, all right. Okay. So I will touch this one later about Wu Wei and so-called Zheng Ming.
I don't think Wu Wei is any part of the legalism. That's a different thing altogether.
Well, wait. Okay, so two clarifications. One is to James. The originator of the Wu Wei was Lao Tzu, not Han Fei. But Han Fei see his philosophy as practical implementation of Wu Wei. That is true. That's why he dedicated 2 chapters to his interpretation of Lao Tzu.
They're both Confucius, right? They're both Confucius, and yeah, and they must be like trying to they believe that they are carrying the same tradition, so that they adopt the same terminologies.
Well, I'm sorry. What do you mean by both? Who and who?
Isn't legalism is okay. So sorry, there's a brain fart. Forget about what I just said.
Okay, let me do this. I think last week, Pin made a very good point. Okay, I don't know if I catch this one. Pin said, okay, I think which I totally agree. All this school is created by Sima Qian, the later historian. Okay, so what we should do is we should treat everyone as individual. Okay, so they have a different, and then when we say Taoism, that's all being created by Sima Qian, the great historian. I think that's, please put this one in mind. When we put the legalism, Taoism, they are not like, okay, we are the school of Harvard Business School, or we are in the Wharton Business School, so we have different idea, or we talk about the, that's totally different concept. So
I have a question for Pin. Because it's just interesting that Han Fei dedicated 2 chapters to Lao Tzu rather than 2 temples. So the ideas become the stand-in for the temple, where the temple was an instrument of how should I say, rituals. And so that's interesting. Could you say something about that? Because that transition is important. Either he's too cheap to dedicate a temple, or whether he actually believed the word now has become more important than the temple itself.
Well, do you think Han Fei even believes in temples? I mean, he believes in the power of the ruler. He probably wouldn't want temples to, kind of dilute that power. So, yeah. So I guess I'm agreeing with you. Han Fei will believe in words as being, more important than temples.
Yeah, the Han Fei and the Lao Tzu relationship, and the Taoism's relationship, and the Wu Wei, that's a very complex issue. Yeah, so I think that you can think about this one. Okay, if you think about this one, Wu Wei, I assume everybody know. Okay, Wu Wei means you don't have to do anything. Okay, easy work. How do you achieve Wu Wei for the ruler, for the emperor? Okay, so if I push harsh rule, harsh law, okay, have everybody work, okay, so I, as a ruler, as an emperor, I can be Wu Wei. I don't have to do anything. I just have the law do the thing. So that's another aspect to tie these 2 philosophies together. Okay, so it's a very subtle, different question, and I probably need to find a good paper and have everybody read it, and then we can have a discussion. We have Adina, right? Thank you.
Yes, so my question is, and thank you so much, this is great. Just explaining the terms and going over the history.
So I remember you talked about Su and the Si last time.
Yes.
I want to have a little bit more explanation today.
Okay, great. And I have one more question about how's the benevolence ran, and or inspiring majesty, they are connected in this particular case. And like if it's, as you said, is the ruler already has
Okay.
that concept, then what's Ren benevolence?
Okay, so sorry, I only to the third point. Okay, I haven't talked about the rest yet. So, so okay, I think you are talking about the way. You know that I will answer. We will discuss your concern, you know, later. Just
Okay.
okay, just put on hold. Let's put it on right now. Let's talk about the three major things. I say the SAT question or the college admission question. Okay, so you don't have to read the book. You just remember these three names. Fa means the law. Su means the tactic. Okay, and the tendency, or here sometimes translation as a position of power. Okay, I think these two, law, rule, tactics. Okay, and in the Western world, everybody knows. But the tendency, they will be subtle. Okay, it's different. Okay, I'm not going to deal with the political now because it's too long discussion. If you remember, we talk about the Go game when you play Chinese chess game, Go. Okay, if you find a Chinese or Japanese teacher to teach you, they will teach you first. They teach you the rule. Okay, that's the law. They will teach you the tactics. Okay, so how to win the game. But remember, if your teacher are Chinese or have an Asian culture, they will tell you 是. Okay, so the position of power. Okay, so that means you look at the high level, okay, bird's eye view of your Go game, you can know your position. Okay, you are in the good position, or you are in the better, you are in the controlling position, or being controlled. So that's the technique. Okay, should not say that's I remember Elena asked about Su and the Si, you know, a few weeks ago. That's why I want to bring this one, so-called Si. Okay, that's another concept. And when we read the text, and the Han Fei also talk about Si. And later on we talk about Wei. But before Wei, we are going to answer James' question about the Zhengmin. Okay, this one. We will talk about this one. Yeah. And we have Pin and Elena.
Hi, yeah, I agree with your explanations of Shi, if I may just elaborate a little bit. I would kind of translate it similarly, but a little differently as situational landscape, meaning that the situation can be a power enhancer or a degrader for you. It's kind of like you put a ball in motion, it can be rolling downhill. That shi is an enhancer. Or the ball, you can be trying to push the ball uphill, and that shi is against you. So it's just another way to look at it.
Yeah, that's a different concept, and we don't find a good English words to match this word. So, but it's being used. Okay, that's why back to our original question: does legalism survive in China or Chinese culture? On the facial value, probably not. But everybody talk about shi. Okay, if you go to find 50 years plus old people with Chinese culture, they will tell you what's meaning of shi. Okay, we have Elena, then James.
Okay, yeah, that's great that we're going deeper into these three concepts. Then how? So when you said assume position of power, evaluate it, it could be very high or very low. And first you're introduced to the laws, the tactics, so first the law, fa, how the game is being played. Then you go into tactics, su, so you basically what's good, what's not, what works, what doesn't. And then you go into tendency, the position of power. Could you please just talk a little bit more? How do you evaluate the position of power, and what do you do after that once you know where you are?
Sorry, I don't think we'll probably talk about this one later. It's a very long answer, and then everybody have their own opinion. you know, so it's not an easy answer. At least, you know, if somebody have a 30-second, 1 minute answer, please answer. No. Okay, Pin. Okay, yeah.
I think it's kind of like the common saying in America, you know, do the right thing at the right time for the right people at the right place. It's we have a similar saying in Chinese, 审时度势, is you examine the time and you survey the situational landscape. You know, and to help you determine what, you know, the opportune situation for you to do something.
Yeah, another good word is 势如破竹. Okay, so if you say you are winning, right? If you look at the bamboo, right, the bamboo stick, right? If you want to split the bamboo stick, right? If you, I don't know, everybody tried it or not. Okay, if you tried it, you will see after you started, right, the whole bamboo will broke. Okay, you don't have to go all the way through. So when Chinese say 势如破竹, that means your 势 just like a broken or split the bamboo stick. So you only started, then the whole bamboo stick will split. Okay, so that's another idea to understand the meaning of 势. And I think when 2-3 weeks from now, when we introduce the art of war, we probably have some concept about this. So that's yeah, a lot of things we probably just have to come again and again and to the point. You know, you will start to people will start to understand. Yeah. Okay, so let's move on, and that's James' question about 证明, right? So the proper translation, that proper means I agree. So rectification of name. Okay, Confucius, okay, talk about this one all the time. Okay, so both Confucianism and legalism talk about 证明, okay, the rectification of name, but they have a different meaning. Confucius, the search, the actuality through the examination of name. So he defined, okay, what's the meaning of 孝, which is filial piety. So you have to walk through, okay, being this way. Okay, he defined what means sage king. As an emperor, you have to behave like a sage king. If you don't, you are tyrant. You will fit to another category called tyrant. You will become the tyrant. So the people don't have to respect you as a king or as an emperor. People will treat you as a tyrant. So you, in Mencius' point of view, the people even have the right to rebel against the tyrant. Okay, so that's the Confucius idea of the rectification of name. But legalism will be different. They were demanding the actuality conform with the name. Okay, you say, do this, that's the law. You follow it. So it become, Chinese name will become called 行名. That means they become a law. Okay, so rectification in legalism become a law, and the people have to fit into the law. So that's the two different ideas, the same concept about the name. So I will call both of them are nominalist, right? So they talk about the name, but they treat the name, the actual, if they doesn't match, they treat a different way. So that's kind of answer James' question about 证明. Yeah. Go ahead, James.
Would you agree that it's the people have to conform to the words of the law? In other words, there is this kind of like quote I see here about how the job of a autocrat, or not an autocrat, but rather a minister is defined by the minister's own language when he kind of describes his job to the ruler. And if he doesn't conform to his words, then he's punished rather than being rewarded. And the same would go to the law. If the people comply, if they comply with the words of the law, they should be respected. And if they do not, they could be punished.
Well, I'm not sure how to answer your question, but I think the difference, I would suggest every kind of do some exercise on that. Okay, so you think about like, you know, I think the easy way to talk, that's only my understanding is easy way to talk about the Confucianism, talking about the moral lesson, and the legalism, talking about the political situation or the penal law. Okay, put this way, you know, so they are talk. Even they have the same name, but you know they talk about different things. You know, so it takes a while to understand. But I just want to mention, you know, Phil.
Yeah, isn't there a problem with the rectification of names? Because in both cases, it seems to be there's a defined definition, but it didn't take into account, I guess, from what you've been lecturing before, the tendencies, the situation in which the name is applied. So it seems to me the name has always had to be interpreted in relationship with the situation that it is in, rather than a kind of de facto dictionary definition of the name. So even if that's correct, it seems to me there's enough flexibility in the names themselves to be fluidly interpreted, because the situation makes it different in terms of its determination. Wouldn't that be shu, part of shu? Well, if the shu is the situation you involve in, you know, as Pin said, whether you roll the ball from uphill or you're rolling the ball uphill, that situation changes the whole context of the manifestation of power. So you have to take into account the actualization of that in a particular situation, not a kind of universal definition that could be applied. So the rectification of name by its own definition is contradictory in a sense.
Well, I have no, I would say I have no disagreement about your saying about, because it's, okay, we are not talking about how to define the name. And both school, legalism and Confucianism, recognize that the real situation and the name itself has a difference. I think, you know, Confucianism try to do is through the morality, have the person to fit the name. Okay, but legalism try to use the external force to force people to fit the name. Again, what's the definition? Of course, the person with authority. Okay, authoritative entity will have the definition. So that's my opinion. But you know, and I will suggest that not go to the too deep, because in each subject we can find a paper, and then we can dig, you know, get a more idea. Today
So what I'm saying is the name is not the truth. The power is the truth. The name is a tool for the power to actualize the name, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. For both schools, they are doing it. Just the way they do it probably different. Yeah.
Okay.
So Pin and the method. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Just follow up on your point. Yeah, I agree with both of you. But I think when Confucius says mean, he meant something a little different, in a different way, like you said, than Han Fei. When Confucius seemed to me more concerned with different levels of hierarchy, proper hierarchy, and whether there's usurpation. You know, like the ruler of Zhou is the highest level of ruler. And only he should have the carriage of a certain size and the court dance of a certain size formation. And then when the lower, like a duke, usurps that and start carrying on having ceremony like the Zhou king, then that usurpation is a violation of the proper mean. Whereas Han Fei looks at it from more of a management point of view. Like Ming is like your employees, for example. They claim that they're going to meet this deadline by a certain, or accomplish this, and you examine whether or not that promise, is met as a task. So they have different emphasis on this.
Yeah, thank you, Pin. Yeah, Madeline.
Yes, it's also a question about the rectification of names. My impression of it was that he's talking about that the laws would apply equally to everyone, that there would be no exceptions, and so that there would be no wiggling around by lawyers saying, well, this really means that, and that really means that. That this is saying, like, this is the law, it is clear, the son turned in his father for doing this, or whatever it is, that it's that he's looking for clarity rather than clemency.
Yeah, I think that you basically, anybody have anything about this? I think you are right, in this one.
I get the impression in this sense that Han Fei is definitely a social realist, just like the author that we were instructed to read an author that says, "Hey, Han Fei is a lot like modern sociology, isn't he?" So you shouldn't have recommended that article to us if you disavow the contents. But there is this kind of sense of realism and empiricism in Han Fei. He's reading history in a very empirical sense. He said, hey, we have evidence that these actual people appeared, that people believe this, that these battles occurred, and let's try to find the reasons or the causes behind all this going on. And hey, Han, you can do a better job of ruling than you're doing right now if you pay attention to some of these trends.
Yeah, thank you, James. I think that's that's same as my opinion. Okay.
I have a comment on what Madeline said, that
just 1 minute.
but it is not the equal dispensing of the law, but since the law is a tool of power, the supreme leader is above the law because he is the one that dispenses the law. So like this is exactly, well, I think you didn't want to bring in power. This is exactly the argument we have about Trump, right? He is above the law because he dispenses the law. He is the supreme law. Maybe you could dispense it against a governor, but not the supreme leader.
Yeah, I think that okay. Make it a very simple description. Okay, both Confucianism and the legalism, they all consider the ruler is above the law. Okay, so I think they all in this way. But the difference is Confucius is a more hierarchical, right? So you are the nobleman, you are the common people. They apply differently, but but for the legalism, okay, everybody the same. Okay, the prince.
Yeah, but one important difference. To Confucius, law is not important. What's more important is that the supreme ruler still has to answer to heaven. And that's what's really important.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we will have many.
Jason, so I just want to add one thing, right? I think what people are missing is the laws are important, but the law in itself, I think the biggest difference between Han Fei and Confucius, look at this. So in Confucianism, there's certain, like what Pin said, right? There's certain particular customs and laws that they will think is really good, right? It's inherently good and it should be practiced at like all times and all circumstances. For Han Fei, even his own law is not as important as how you administer that particular law. So for example, I think someone said like, the ruler is above all laws. Yes, but he has to apply that law very consistently. So for example, if he says, hey, murder is good and I will reward you, and being a teacher is bad, I will punish you. He can tomorrow switch back to murder's bad and teacher's good. He basically had to stick to the exact application of whatever law that he had administered to the end, if he hoped to govern peacefully. Because to Han Fei, the biggest importance is disorder, right? So it's not so much of the law so he's kind of like a relativist on the law, right? I think most people agree with that. But it is the administration of the law. And people see that you're applying that, not everybody's the same, but it's just that with every single outcome, if you have reward or punishment, that particular outcome, one way at the beginning, you will continue to reward and punish that outcome the same way, unless you wish a completely different outcome.
All right. Yeah, thank you, Chris. Okay, so let's put on a little hold on, compare the Confucianism and legalism at this moment. We need to really move on. I have to respect some people, some audience. I know some people want to go inside, so I just will have to a little bit control on that. You are welcome to discuss after or at a later time. Sorry about this. So we have a few hands up. That's after these three Rich. I have to Rich go first. He hasn't spoken yet. Rich and Madeline and James. Okay, after this three, I'm going to move on. Okay, Rich, please.
Jason. I'll try to make my comments brief. My reading of 49 is not legalism. It's more social commentary.
Yes.
The way I read it is he's describing, and I think pretty accurately, the nature of human beings in the social context and in the legal context and a governing context. Mm-hmm. So the full title I'm reading of this translation is Five Vermin, a pathological analysis of politics. A pathological analysis of politics, not a way to put together a legal system. And I know you're going to discuss the final paragraph where he discusses the five vermin. I believe he's very accurate in his description, and it's somewhat comforting and discomforting to know that what he describes. How long ago was this? A couple thousand years ago?
22,300, I think. Around.
Yeah, it's comforting to know humans haven't changed a bit.
Yeah.
It's exactly the same. The circle goes round and round. It's only the actual mechanics that change. So.
Yeah, thank you, Rich. Okay, so next is Madeline.
I just thought I would throw this in there. Someone mentioned that the ruler is ultimately accountable to heaven and is the link between the divine and human beings. And I think it's also difficult for us as modern readers to imagine a world in which there is one supreme leader and there's no legal court system without that leader to appeal to. In other words, there's no he is the Supreme Court. And that's the mess that is described in Hamlet, which always kind of reads strangely to a modern reader, but in fact, these people who were plotting and scheming and killing each other were the ultimate court of appeal. So Hamlet had nowhere to turn when his uncle murdered his father and married his mother and blah, 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 blah. There was no other place to go except for his own actions. And so those were the kind of the lives and the actions of the people at the very top in this kind of system.
Thank you for reminding us. I think. Okay, James.
In a way, I'm kind of making the opposite comment. I just noticed some people haven't distinguished between what a ruler is and what is a magistrate's duty or an administrator's duty. In other words, these were very large societies with perhaps Han was millions of people, I think, at that time. So it was like a question of there's no question that magistrates and local administrators existed that were solely responsible for administration of justice. And so the law was, if there was law at all, and there probably was law, even though Han was a Confucianist, there was a legalist, and he studied with Han Fei. So there was this. There had to be this idea that it's not the ruler who's responsible for the interpretation of the law. There are local administrators and magistrates for that. Correct?
Okay. So just to remind everybody, during that time, it's in between the feudalism and the central government. Okay, so Qin Empire is kind of like have a central control government, and the system Confucius highly praised in the Zhou Dynasty is the feudalism. Okay, so just as a fact, for after Qin Dynasty for 2,000 years, China is not a feudalism system. Okay, unlike Western Europe. Okay, it's a feudalism basics. Okay, but China never been a feudalism. It's a central government. Always have a central government. So that's the systematic very different. And during this time is the transition. So that's a long story we can talk. Let's move on for the second concept. I think somebody who mentioned this one. That's also kind of as difficult as the word 是. Okay, that's called Wei. Okay, so that's I think that's a good translation called all-inspiring majesty. It's a Wei. I put the Ren here is that's the advice, personal quality for the ruler. Confucius want, or the Confucian school, they want the ruler, the emperor have Ren. Okay, so when you see the Japanese emperors, they have no last name. They have a first name only, 2 characters. Okay, for last 1,000 years, the emperor, Japanese emperor's name, 2 characters. 1 character must be Ren. Okay, let's see how important of Ren to the ruler. And opposite to Confucius' teaching, Han Fei want the ruler has something called Wei. Okay, so that's another many hours discussing what is Wei. Okay, I find the translation called all-inspiring majesty. Makes sense, but I believe other people disagree, but we can talk later, but not too much. But basically, that's a different concept here. So basics is, if I have to say, I think Han Fei used an example, right? Confucius is a better person than his emperor, but why Confucius had listened to him? Because he has a position, he has a way, something like this. So that's the different concept. I put the Ren here is to contrast the 2 schools difference. Anything to talk about this? Then we move on another key concept. Okay, I think Pim will talk about this one sometime. That's the subject Pim is interested. Okay, so Confucius talk about when you rule over different states. Okay, right now, world is that have many states. We haven't talked international yet. If you want govern, at that time they already have the concept. Sooner or later, they have 1 state will govern or control the entire China. Okay, so Confucius is talking about so-called Wang Dao. Okay, so the kinship, sometimes called kinship, basics. Use Ren, okay, benevolence, okay, to everybody will respect you. Okay, so that's so-called the kinship of Wang Dao. And the legalism are different. They call Ba. That's another difficult word called Ba. Okay, and basics is hegemony. Okay, you use power. Okay, people scared of you or whatever. That's another. I believe we will have more discussion on legalism. Okay, so just like at the beginning, I think Phil talked about on the surface, legalism may not be that important in Chinese culture, but it probably run into everybody's blood. Okay, so as grow up in the Chinese culture, you probably don't need to read Han Fei, and you already inherit the idea of legalism. So that's probably important to understand for the people outside Chinese culture. Elena?
Yes. So it just I'm going back to my question about benevolence and what you've said is, Jason. So it's the ruler in the Confucianism point of view and the world. The ruler expresses or asserts his power over the state through benevolence. So basically being less assertive, less, how to say, like tyrant-like. Is that right? Versus in legalism, everyone knows you are the ruler and you obey because of there is a law, and that's how it is. Is that?
Yeah, in
If
general,
someone knows that.
yeah, I will agree, on that, and then it's interesting to think. I will kind of like think of this one as a homework for everybody. Think about these three schools. What kind of ruler? If you are the Taoism ruler, what you will do? If you are the legalism, what you will do? If you are the Confucian ruler, what you will do? Okay, probably I can put this one as a homework. Everybody can think about this quick question. Okay, so it will test your understanding of this philosophy, three different philosophies, and they will get the idea. Because in my opinion, all these philosophers are talking to the ruler. They are not interested to talk about you and me. They are talking to this ruler, tell them how to rule, including Taoism. So if you can imagine, if you are the ruler, okay, and for the different school, how are you going to deal with today's situation? We're not going to discuss how are you going to do it now, but I think that was a good exercise for you. James.
Yeah, I have a quote directly from Han Fei. I just found in the mountain of thousands of Ren, those who are lame and easy to pasturage, the barbarian is also. That's in section 6.
Section 6.
Could you please repeat it? Could you please repeat what you said?
In the mountain with thousands of Ren, those who are lame and easy to pasturage, the barbarian is also. So in other words, it's a warning. Actually, the sentence starts out, therefore, in the city of 10 Ren, those who can pass by Lu Jifu are cliffy. And I don't understand that reference at all. But in the mountain of thousands of Ren, those who are lame and easy to pasturage, meaning that benevolent people are sheep, the barbarian is also. That's section 6 of five termites.
Section 6 on 5 termites.
Yeah.
Okay. Section 6 on 5 termites. Let me see what he's talking about. Oh, okay. We will talk about this. We'll talk about this. Yeah, yes. I know.
It's a cool quote. I like it.
Okay, so let's go to the. Okay. Let's go to the text. Okay, I think we have about 40 minutes left. Let's spend 30 minutes to talk about text. So then we have the time to discussion on this one. Okay, so this one is additional about the two handles. I think it's talking about in general for governing well. It is necessary to follow. I think this one in the text to follow the nature disposition. Okay, the actual word is qin. The nature disposition of man. Men have their likes and their dislike, and thus reward and the punishment can be utilized. So if from the human nature talk about like, dislike, and they draw the conclusion, what we should do is reward and the punishment. Since reward and the punishments can be utilized, prohibits and the decrees can be established. I think the translation is a little bit odd because in Chinese, the law, when we talk about law at that time, there's a prohibition. Okay, so you prevent the people from doing something, and the decrees, you want people to do something. So the so-called fa and the ling, there's a two concept. You stop people doing something and order people to something. As you go to the war, build the Great Wall. So that's what he talked about. And the orders of the state can be achieved. The ruler grasps the two handles of the punishment and the reward in order to place himself in a position of power, which is 是, and thus what is commanded is implemented and what is predecessors. So that means what you want people to do, they will do it. And what you don't want people to do, people will cease doing it. So basically here is explaining the logic here is use human like and dislike, okay? Based on like and dislike, you have two handles as a governor, okay? As a ruler, you have two handles, which is punishment and the reward. When you hold in this two handles or two helms, somebody call it helms, okay? Then you are in the position of power, which is 是. Then you can control your state efficiently. So his concern is more on how to efficiently govern the state. And then, unlike Confucius, Confucius' concern is how to keep the order, how to preserve, okay, the stability of the state. And then Han Fei's concern is more on taking the position of power, which is 是, and you can efficiently govern the state. That's what I want to talk about on this one. Any question on this one? Phil?
Yeah, I have a question. So reward and punishment in this case is not what we think of as reward and punishment, because it's the way we think of reward is, let's say if you do something good, you're gonna get some money, you're gonna get a bushel or whatever. But reward in this case is merely, I'm gonna let you keep on doing what you're doing because it's good enough. It's in order, right? So there's actually no reward. There's actually just a lack of punishment. Punishment seems to be the same as we think of it now. You do this, we're going to forbid you from doing it by putting you in jail or whatever, maybe even executing you. That's punishment. So reward and punishment actually used in this way is not, at least not the way we think of reward and punishment. It's just punishment and the lack of punishment. Because just keep doing what you're doing, that's okay, right?
Yeah, Phil, I'm glad you asked this question, and I have been thinking about this question. What is the reward, right? Only have the punishment. Okay, they have the reward, okay? So if you compare the society during that time, if you choose which state you want to, or you want to stay in China, okay, let's say you were reborn, okay, in the ancient 23,000 years ago, 2,300 years ago. I think I would prefer born in China than in Europe, right? Because in Europe, unless I born in the nobility family or ruling class, so if I born in the regular farmers, I'm terrible life, right? I have no hope in my life, okay? But in China, especially in the Qin, okay, you have a good life. Think about this. Most of the people in the feudalist system, if you are commoner, you have no reward. You just live as you are, and when the government asks you to go to the war, then you go fight the war. If you die, you die. But Qin dynasty is different. They say that the 19 ranking, okay? So everybody, they go to fight, okay? If you behave one enemy's head, then you will pump up your ranking. Government will give you ranking, they give you money. So they have a 19 rank. So technically, if you were in the Qin state, you have a hope, you have a reward, okay? So as long as you follow it, you kill more people, you will get higher position, you will get the money, and then one day you will become the minister. So that's the hope they have. So it's really, really significant reward compared to the rest of the world. So that's my answer. Yeah, thank you.
But
And
Jason,
last-
can I give you a different answer?
okay, please.
Yeah, so I think think it this way. So in a good portion of Chinese history, right? Like people follow the Confucius model, and then eventually, so you had to pass the test, right? It's kind of like the SAT of the day. So people are graded on their writing, accuracy, style, and a lot of people advanced because they were very good writers.
Yeah.
And they can write poems, they can compose songs, and then they end up getting put into very important administrative positions. They become like mayors and governors, like equivalent of today, right? But they don't have any skill of that. They're incredibly good speakers and writers, but they're not good governors. So in terms of reward, there's definitely a reward. They basically, Han Fei is saying, I am going to reward you. I'm going to design a system that reward you for proper, meritorious activities that fits the bill, that fits the reward. So I'm going to apply an important post to you is not because you can sing and dance and write, it's because you can govern. If I'm going to confer the Medal of Valor on you, it's not because you're really good at killing people for money, it's because you fought in my war on my side and you defeated enemies. There's a very, very important distinction. So I think it's definitely not no reward. It's actually saying I'm going to have a very, very clear reward, and the definition and why you got the reward is super important.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Yeah, that's the reward. Yeah, and
Can I add?
okay, Pin. Yeah.
I just want to add one famous historical story to that point. So another slightly earlier legalist, Shang Yang, is a little earlier than Han Fei. He was really the first legalist that became prime minister of the state of Qin, and really played a key role in making Qin rise very quickly. So the way he established order initially was he put a stick in the marketplace and had a sign that says whoever can move the stick by 50 paces gets 1,000 ounces of gold. So first people gathered, it sounded too good to be true. Everyone was just looking, nobody would actually step forward to do it until one person decided, was brave enough to just do it. He got 1,000 ounces. And immediately people started falling in line. So this one story really illustrates the concept of the reward and also of this wei and shi. This is how the legalists create these power enhancers and establish credibility of through. So yeah. Anyway, just wanted to share that.
Yeah, thank you, Pin. Joe.
No, I was just trying to get through my head at exactly what a reward is. I mean, because this actually just seems very, very similar to the way American society or even modern day Chinese society works with even social credit scoring or whatever it may be. Or if you do something good deemed by the state, if you join the military, if you're an American, you get benefits. If you don't and you do something wrong, you do something whatever non-meritorious, they punish you. So it seems very kind of analogous to what we do today. But my understanding with legalism is that people were accountable to each other in some way, shape, or form. How did that actually function? I didn't understand that, like in one of the parts that I was reading.
Okay, yeah, that's a complex part. Let me briefly talk about this, but that's a very different, because see, if I know my neighbor is rebelling, then rebel is going to rebel or doing something bad. So I have the responsibility to report. So they have something. Okay, so basically, if they find like your neighbor is commit some like against government, say, so the whole neighborhood will be punished. Okay, so that's kind of, yeah. So that's another subject we should talk later.
Okay, thank you.
Audrey, please.
Well, I've been reading sections on the five vermin, and they talk. All I've seen about how to describe a reward. It says the best rewards are those that are generous and predictable, so that the people may profit by them. Which I really didn't understand the sentence necessarily. So I'm sure they mean something different by profit. And the best penalties are those that are severe and inescapable, so that people will fear them. And the best laws are those that are uniform and inflexible, so that the people can understand them. And then the very next paragraph, it says, those who practice humanness and rightness should not be praised, for to praise them is to cast aspersion on military achievements, meaning the integrity of people. Men of literary accomplishment should not be employed in the government, for to employ them is to bring confusion to the law. And that's pretty much like our Democrats say, some of them. Or you're a professor in college. In the state of Chu, there was a man named Honest Gong. When his father stole a sheep, he reported the theft, basically what you're talking about, Jason. And the local magistrate, considering that the man, Honest Gong, was in the service of his sovereign, but a villain to his own father, he replied, put him to death. And the man was accordingly sentenced and executed. Thus, we see that a man who was an honest subject of his sovereign may be an infamous son to his father. In that particular translation, I don't really know if the son was killed or the father was killed. So
The father is killed, I think.
the father that stole the sheep or whatever.
No, Jason, I actually think it's a son.
It's
Because
confusing.
it's a son. It's a very similar case with the spy case in Russia with Stalin. Because you have this concept of fealty to your parents, which is super important in China, versus your fealty to the government. So they're kind of there's a duality there.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
This kind of question has been discussed for 1,000 years in this one. Confucius.
Yeah, I think he's just giving an example of the duality, and then how it's very difficult to govern when you have a confusion because of duality.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, thank you, Chris. Yeah, that's very important. And
So-
because I immediately Mencius talk about like Sun's father, right? Committed murder. Okay, so what he should do? Let's say if you are emperor, your father committed a crime, what you should do? So this kind of question they've been discussed. Yeah. We have a Jin.
What is what's the okay, it's the rewards and punishment. Is it done by monetary means? Because reward could be interpreted as could be you can get that reward and punishment through price mechanism, right? It's like did they like reward people by giving them more money or punish them by stripping them of their bank account? I mean that these are what
I
are the
think Han Fei, it can
examples of
be
rewards and
anything, but the predictable part that Audrey mentioned, right? That's why I shared that story. First, you announce what it is, and then you follow through with it. It can be money, it can be position, it can be benefits, it can be, but you announce it, say you do it's like training a dog, the dog does something, you tell it to, you give it a cookie. And if it, and you choke the chain if it does something that you told it not to.
Yeah, thank you.
So it's more like operant conditioning.
Key.
It's an operant conditioning of operant conditioning people to be motivated by incentives, by rewards and that's how you can rule people. Yeah.
Yeah, that is the concept, and that's why the Audrey's example, like you cannot use the moral to rule because they have the ambiguity here, so always conflict. I think we will talk about this one later.
Yeah.
Gene, you haven't spoken.
Oh, Gene, sorry.
No, Gene, not you. Yeah,
Yeah,
you are next.
so
Sorry.
I'm grateful to hear all your thoughts on Chinese philosophy. I haven't really studied it too much, but I am Korean, and so I got it. And I've always thought in terms of yin and yang, or I have for a while. I'm curious about what was going on in terms of interaction with the West that might have been part of the necessity for creating these philosophies. And also just wanted to comment that Confucianism and legalism to me seem like the yin and yang of philosophies. Like the legalism is the yang. It's like you do it this way, you have to be right, you got to stick to the rule. Whereas Confucianism is more about noticing the essence of humanity and trying to, give words to it. And so, yeah. So I think rewards and punishments is a similar issue of yin and yang. And yeah, it's just curious to see all that.
Thank you, Jane. Yeah, next week we talk about the I Ching. Okay, so we have a yin and yang to talk about. So welcome to join next week. So, James and Philip.
Yeah, looking at the text, I got the impression that Han Fei really believes in natural rewards too. He talks about the farmer being rewarded by his farming, and that his family business will benefit. There's all kinds of comments in here. The family business is also reduced. So in other words, the efforts are reduced because of the benefits of the farming. There's a sentence here: the Lord gives rewards and does not move, and punishes without forgiveness. Fame assists the reward. The destruction follows punishment, and the virtuous and the wrong will do their best. So in other words, he's saying that virtue and essentially bad behavior are prevalent, are all things that will continue, but virtue in a way is its own reward. But the Lord gives rewards in order to assist the good. In order to move things along, you do implement rewards from the government. So there's this idea that rewards and punishment will sort of like exist in society already. They exist in nature. Your business may succeed or fail, regardless of your household may succeed or fail, regardless of the government's intervention. But what the government achieves is improved social order through rewards and punishment.
Thank you, James. Okay, we have
I have a comment.
Okay, please, sure, please.
Yes.
Ben, right? So
if you look at the state, any society have rulers, like the Greeks, like the Romans, the Romans are not known really to have philosophers. Why? Because they were netly a militaristic power. When you have a militaristic power like the Greeks, the Romans, any military power, philosophy really don't flourish. And then if it does flourish, if you have the classics, like the Chinese classics, they really don't differ from the main objective of the state. In the case of this guy, the warring states were in upheaval. They were warring against each other. So they were trying to find out who was going to be the predominant state in order to take all other states. That's exactly what happened eventually. So a process of power always support philosophies that will support the state. And any philosopher that goes against that will be killed, basically. Like Socrates got killed. He was not nicely, because he was a nice philosopher, he was famous, he had a lot of followers, the youth of Greece, the youth, corrupting the youth of Greece. Why? How you corrupted them? Like, go to bed or something? No, the Greeks were already kind of smooth on it. So, what I'm going with, the legalities come after the state. There's no law before the state. There was a natural law, something that was natural, that it was there. Example, in China, up to recently, they did not have building codes.
Okay, thank you, Ben. Okay, so we have to move. Yeah. Okay, we have to move.
Natural law.
So I
Hold on.
yeah.
Philip, please. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think it's relevant to what Ben is talking about. I think it is philosophy, is philosopher in the service of the state? Is it part of the state mechanism? Is it and I would say that any good philosopher, it is not, right? And if you're asking, well, if you're talking about even, I think is in human nature and in the way that we run our society from the very beginning, right? When humans organize ourselves in any sort of way, there is some sort of justification for rule, right? And then there's a justification. If there's a justification for rule, it seems to me that there is a justification to revolt, to go against the rule. I think that legalism would be just, I wouldn't say it's a philosophy, it's just a methodology, maybe to how do you run a society based on rewards and punishment, based on incentives, which I think is a pretty common sense notion. It's pretty much the true. I mean, any society who is a society, which is society, have some mechanism of reward and punishment, and that's a no-brainer. But a philosopher would be, or any state would we care a lot about just justification of full rule, and the justification. And if you're smart, I mean, you care about the justification to revolt, or why you need to change the government. It seems, yeah.
All right, thank you. I think please let's stick with the text.
Yeah. So yeah, I just want
just 1 minute. We have a lot of people and the hands up. Okay, so let's go this order from the Chris, Pin, and the Jin. Yeah.
Okay, so I just there's so many things said.
I will remind everybody, please hold to stick with the subject about it.
Yeah. So I think number one, just based on just focus on this text, right? The 5 verses or the 5 churches. I don't think Han Fei make a distinction whether he's saying pure compassion, benevolence, and refinement is a good or bad thing. I think he's saying the thing is neutral. Maybe personally he'll even prefer it. He is simply stating that they're not, exactly very useful in statecraft, in maintain stability and prosperity as a state, right? As a tool. And he despises people who pretend to be compassionate and benevolent and knowledgeable in order to usurp the population to achieve their own selfish goals, right? So I definitely don't think he's advocating killing philosophers and learned men. He is basically saying that people should be put into their proper positions as they would have accomplished. So, go back to that farming example that I think a couple of people talk about right before me. If you're a Confucius scholar but you don't till the field, you shouldn't be rewarded, as a magistrate for farming, or you shouldn't be rewarded like 2 farms. If you're a Confucius scholar but never take up swords for your country and don't know how to fight, you shouldn't be rewarded the title of the general or title of a warrior, right? It really comes down to be very, very specific and clear rewarding the things that people have actually accomplished. That's compensating to the title they're being rewarded to. I think that's without like any other thing being added to it.
All right, thank you, Chris. Yeah, I think that's you jump ahead to the conclusion, the fighter. So who's next? Pin and Audrey, Pin and Jin and Audrey. Okay.
Yeah, following this thread, I agree with Chris, but the tragic thing is later, when after Qin united China, at the recommendation of Li Si, Han Fei's former schoolmate, and the person who influenced the king to kill Han Fei, Qin wound up burning all the, trying to at least burn all the books except the ones in the central library, and also killed a lot of scholars. So it's interesting that this passage was kind of a foreshadowing, and later something like this happened.
All right, thank you, Pin. Okay, so next is Jin and Audrey, then Phil.
Yeah, I don't know the history that well, but my intuition is telling me that it was in somewhat reaction to what else was going on in the world and trying to galvanize their society, organize their society so that they would be the most competitive. And yet everybody has their own perspective on what is going to get them there. So I think that's what I'm seeing is just this, like the Democrats and the Republicans, some people are reacting from fear, and some people are reacting from or responding from a desire to enhance, to follow their own true nature or philosophy rather than just react to threats. So anyway, just wanted to contribute. And I also wanted to say that whole thing about managers, like when you're scoring well on the test and then you're promoted to manager, but you can't manage. I heard that's exactly what happens at Microsoft. So it's interesting to hear that. Thanks.
Thank you, Jin. Yeah, I'd like to respond to what you are saying. All the philosopher who's writing something, he's respond to something, right? He tried to do something. He's just not write to you. 2,000 years later's reader. He has some purpose. Who's next? Audrey, please.
I was just going to talk about the different, reading this chapter 49 in this translation. It talks about, how basically there's a real difference between public and private. And that he's saying that the magistrate of Chu executed a man as a result of the felonies of the state, but were never, the magistrate of Chu executed a man. And as a result, the felonies of the state were never reported to the authorities. The next one was Confucius rewarded a man, and as a result of Lu, thought nothing of surrendering or running away in battle. Since the interests of superior and inferior are as disparate as all this, it is hopeless for the ruler to praise the actions of the private individual and at the same time try to ensure blessings of the state's altars of the soil and grain. And then the next paragraph, it's translated as talking about the creation of the writing system, Changzhi, is that how you say it? He used the character for private to express the idea of self-centeredness and combined the elements for private and opposed to form the character for public. So the fact that public and private are mutually opposed was already well understood at the time of Sang Chu. To regard the two as being identical in interest is a disaster that comes from lack of consideration. And that's a pretty important concept. And I don't think it has anything to do with what was going on in the West at that particular time. I think this is Han Fei.
So Audrey, let me ask you: did you read the whole chapter 49?
No, I don't think I have the whole chapter. I tried to get the PDF of the whole chapter. I have just large sections of it.
Okay, so that's I'm probably going to do. I haven't get the 49 yet. So okay, we already almost 2 o'clock. So look, guys, I'm not sure. It's too much interested. People are so interested in Han Fei. So I probably have to schedule another legalism session. Okay, but I will change the flavor a little bit so we can move on. So, but really thank you for everybody had so much interest. But if you are, and I find out a lot of people like Audrey probably read actual work, do the actual homework. And so,
well, great, Jason, you gave us as an assignment something on, something else. And basically that guy was trying to prove something in terms of sociology, which I found interesting, and I read that. But just in the time that you guys are talking, I realize you really are talking about chapter 49. So I've been reading it and being quiet while you guys are all talking so I can find things, so I could follow along.
Thank you, Audrey. So I probably will put another assignment as like reading I eventually find a good translation on the chapter 49, and I probably will run another section about the 49. Since most of the people familiar with some concept, we probably can go through 49 in another way. So I figure out, but I will take a break from legalism for a few weeks, so we will have a mental break. I think, and I also realize I probably not talking about Confucianism enough. Okay, so I don't want to have my personal bias affect anybody. So I probably will try to schedule another Confucianism. Just like this, read a text closely, and then we will understand, get the idea. So we have a few hands up, then we have a pin and Phil.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well, sorry, Phil. When I read Han Fei, I often wonder, like, there seems, is there a higher purpose in Han Fei's mind? Everything is about empowering a state, making it strong, how to make the ruler powerful. Then I have to remind myself, I think it's good for maybe for everyone to remember too, is Han Fei most likely wrote this book for an audience of one, the king of Qin. He supposedly, I think, maybe wrote a lot of it while he was locked up in prison. He really wanted the book to get to the king of Qin to change his mind and employ him to run the country. So I give him, it could be that Han Fei in his mind really did have a higher purpose, but it was not for this audience of one, so he never wrote it down. So
thank you, Pim. I'm sorry, and I read James' request. I had to keep my promise. $5. We have to show. So before end, we have to show the $5. Okay. So you see, there's so much. Okay. So at the end, okay, Han Fei draw the conclusion. Okay, there's the 5 termites. I don't think vermin. I think termite is the best translation because the word "du," the Chinese word, means the bug who will eat the wood. So you think about the wood building, they have the different kinds of termite. They were not immediately the criminal. They are not criminal. They will corrupt the state. But basically, they're just like a termite. They stay there for a long time. They are not productive, and then eventually corrupt the whole building. That's Han Fei want to draw in this conclusion. So let me show the conclusion, and then you probably have more interest to read next time. So first is scholar. Okay, I believe he means a Confucian scholar. Okay, moral predecessors, so-called Ru. Okay, so basically these people is intelligentsia. Okay, they discuss the philosopher. I think that's what he's talking about. They talking like us. We're not productive. We just complain, talk about things. So that's first thing. Second thing, he talk about the sophists. Okay, basically they argue. They keep arguing. The ancient time is good. Okay, So remember at that time that most of the Chinese, especially Confucians, they think the old times is good. And we don't have a chance to read the Han Fei's text closely. He talked about the ancient sage king tradition. He always said like, oh, you do the same way, you know. It's funny to do the same way because the time is changed, technical is changed. So that's the second termite he want to remove. Second is the so-called the knight errant. So kind of like a self-force, right? They said, because you can imagine in the old time, they always have some people, they play certain rule as a police. Okay, they help people to catch the robbers, you know, this kind of people. So because of this one, they take the government job. They're supposed to be government job. The third one is a little bit difficult to understand, the people who avoid the public service. So means the sick people and some people traveling around. Okay, so it's difficult to ask them to be in the draft, right, for the public service. And probably he also means some aristocrats, right? Some noble people, they are rich and they don't do anything. Okay, kind of the termite. He probably mean that. Okay, so and the third one, the fifth one is the merchant artisans. Okay, so in his view, only two professions make sense: farmer, okay, who produce food, okay, and the military. So basically, the farmer also serves the military because the soldier is during the time, you know, it's not so busy. The government will ask you to do the public service. During the war, they will ask the people to fight. And if there's in the peacetime, people have to do the farming. Okay, so that's his idea. And that's why these 5 people, okay, 5 termites have to remove. So, okay, so that's the time. That's have some time to discuss. We have a lot of hands up. Let's go from Theo, Chris, and the Medway, please.
Yeah, the problem I find with legalism is that it really is an instrument of power. So that would if it's successful, stabilize society. But unfortunately, because of its instrument of power, then it will maintain the steadiness of the ruler for infinitum, which means there cannot be any radical change, only minute changes that satisfy and maintain the power that be, which is good for stability, but not good for progress or change that's necessary in society. I think that that's a criticism I have of it. You know, it is China has succeeded to be a very stable society, maybe first, maybe only second to Egypt, but it did not progress at the right time because it discouraged any kind of rebellion because the power is so strict that it consistently maintained the status quo, and the change is only to finesse the rules that will enhance power. And so that's a problem, that not only because it favors the ruling class, but just favors change altogether.
Thank you, Phil. Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't think so. I don't think that China was like that stable. I mean,
yeah, that's okay. So right now it's kind of okay. So I see a lot of people haven't spoke yet. Okay, do you mind to speak something like Mark? And I know you are engaged a lot. You ask a question on the chat. So you want to say something? I just want to invite some people haven't spoke yet. So like Mark, Lisa, and Dave, if you, or Katie, if you want to speak, just go ahead. If you don't mind, never mind. No, you'd better keep quiet. That's fine. And Pin, please.
Yeah, just follow up on the conversation with Phil. Yeah, you know, I would say the legalists succeeded in quick buildup of the state power, but failed spectacularly in longevity. You know, they thought it would do that, and the first emperor Qin Shi Huang said, you know, this dynasty is going to last forever, and it lasted 15 years. And I guess a Confucianist would say, look, heaven at the end won, because the mandate of heaven, when you have a popular uprising, the Confucianists always interpret that as you lost the mandate of heaven, and people rise up to throw you over.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's a 2,000 years discussion.
So hey, Jason, can I just, because I gotta run, I just want to cut.
Okay, Chris.
So good discussion, right? But I just want to say the last 5 definition, I just take a small issue because I just went back to go through both the Chinese and the English version again. I think he's not saying all, like for example, he's not saying all politicians, right? And he's not saying all knights, and he's not saying like all couriers. He's saying if you're in these professions who do these kind of things.
Are you sure?
Right.
Yeah,
because I'm just rereading that. Yeah, because I think because logically, right? Because in a war you would need because some of these people are like ambiguous, right? Because during peacetime they could be
okay.
They could wear swords, but during wartime you would need them. And then like for politicians, for every Ted Cruz, there's somebody who's not like Ted Cruz, right? Just so people know who Ted Cruz is. I mean, see, Ted Cruz will both fit underneath the wily politician and the sophist category, but not every politician is like that. And don't think he is saying that.
Thank you for your opinion. And yeah, okay. Thank you for your opinion. I think that's keep this disagreement for a while.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's how I read it.
Well, I think we probably should have some discussion, and I probably should do more study to make sure I am right or you are right. So thank you for bringing up the different idea. But the difference between Chris and me is I believe Han Fei talk about all scholars, all people, and Chris think that's part of them. So that's the agreement we have. But we will resolve. Well, we probably never resolved, but we will talk about this one later. Who's next? Madeline, then Pin.
Okay, there we go. I had a comment on number 5, which is listed as merchants and artisans, and perhaps Jason or Pin can clarify that. My impression from the reading that I did was that what he objected to was that they're not primary producers. They're not primary contributors to society. They're not like a farmer or a doctor or a butcher. He's talking about kind of more like the hucksters of the world. In other words, the artisans, he's not talking about people who make humble pottery for the other people in the village. He's talking about people who make gewgaws and travel around selling them little charms or decorations or something. So it would be more comparable to how many people in the US today are making a living. And that's the impression that I got, that he wasn't discussing merchants and artisans in the way that we usually think of them in an old-fashioned way. Could one of you clarify?
Pin, you want to clarify? I have my own opinion, but I believe it's like.
I agree with that. You look at his criticism, right? It's people who are opportunists, wait for accumulate other people's production and wait for the right time to make profit. And that's actually, it's interesting. It's something that seems like Confucianists agree with that too. In traditional society in China, the so-called the business person is always put at the lowest esteem because of that reasoning, Madeline, that you just stated. Because they don't produce, they just make money off of other people's sweat and tear. Yes, and on the disagreement, Jason, sorry, I tend to lean toward Chris because I think the essay, I agree with the essay saying that Han Fei is very kind of an experimentalist. To him, people are like really like dogs. You can just train them. It's the behavior that matters to Han Fei. So So, you know, whether you're a scholar or a sophist, if you behave the way I tell you to, and I want you to, then that's okay.
Okay, thank you, Pin, for disagree. But I will do more research on it because based on my understanding, because the traditional in Chinese, people look down on the people doing business, you know, and manufacturing, and then Han Fei is more clear, you know, he doesn't want this one, not the bad one. This not the right. That's my thinking. Okay, so you know, I'm not saying I'm right, but basically that's the way I read it. So, who's next? Mark, you haven't spoken yet.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. I just wanted to comment on the statement about merchants. My understanding is that in the ancient world, the animosity towards merchants is pretty ubiquitous. Aristotle talked a lot against merchants too. Marx quotes Aristotle in Capital as talking about how merchants don't produce anything. So I don't think this is just an ancient Chinese thing. I think this